thoughts on scanning your family's legacy photos, and the safety of Ford's vehicles. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Slack, available to all patrons of MacVoices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. The MacVoices live panel shifts gears this time around and talks about scanning your family's legacy paper photos based on an article by a friend of ours, and why I wish I'd had that article 10 or 15 years ago. Then we wrap up by touching on Ford's assertion that their vehicles are safe to drive in spite of a small security vulnerability. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking. Under the heading of public service announcement, I don't think there's anything to be worried about unless you drive a Ford, and even then I don't know it's a big deal, but Bleeping Computer had an article that says, Ford says cars with Wi-Fi vulnerability still safe to drive. I don't know how comfortable I am.
Tell that to Jeep.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're driving a Ford, you may want to take a look at that link. According to this, it's the entertainment system that apparently has this vulnerability. So, but I don't know how tied in the entertainment system is to the critical operating parts of the vehicle. So
our manufacturers are notoriously horrible at security. So I would assume that if you have a way to get into the infotainment system on a car, then you would have the ability to get into other parts of the car. I mean, unless it's like a completely sandboxed computer. But if it's displaying additional information, like how fast is your car going, how much fuel do you have, stuff like that, then it has to have some sort of way of communicating outside of that specific computer to other computers in the car. I would assume that the security that would be in place to protect those systems either doesn't exist or it's poorly implemented. I have no faith in car manufacturers to give us secure computer systems.
I think you could probably cross car off that sentence and it'd still be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Absolutely fair.
I don't know. Does anybody here drive a Ford?
I have one. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
but do you drive it?
Yeah, no, but it's a 2017, so it's outside the purview of the Sync 3 system. Generally speaking, and someone's going to argue against me on this. Generally speaking, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration requires a car manufacturer to keep the engine control module or the electronic control module that controls the engine separate from the entertainment system. Okay. And that is that granted that Tesla and the EVs kind of blurred that line a lot, but generally speaking, you shouldn't have to worry about something modifying the entertainment system messing with the powertrain system. Generally speaking, someone's going to argue with me on that, but
I think that seems reasonable. Yeah. You might get rickrolled, but
they keep those two worlds separate. Now I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but one of the things we were talking about several weeks ago was General Motors not allowing CarPlay to play on their cars, or the same thing that you can't use CarPlay in a Tesla. The real issue there that nobody wanted to bring up was that it had nothing to do with CarPlay in and of itself. But if they're trying to get to the self-driving features, the navigation system within the car works hand in hand with the self-driving feature. And when you bring in a third-party one like CarPlay, it will supersede or overwrite the car's built-in navigation system. So that's part of the reason why GM did what they did. I still won't buy a GM car because of it. Don't get me wrong, but it all has to do with some of these self-driving and nav systems that these car manufacturers won't do. That's why Tesla does not have CarPlay. But what they have done is that they add Apple Music as part of their entertainment system. So I'm happy with that. So
yeah, it's interesting, Webb, and of course, and I am not doing the argument thing, but Jeff said it. Then what happened with Jeep? If
now,
those
to be
systems are
fair,
supposed to be separate.
With Jeep, the hack that they used to get in did not involve the infotainment system.
Yeah,
and they were able, through whatever they did, to take complete control over a vehicle. And the test they did with a journalist and the journalist's consent was to take control of his car, and they sped it up, they slowed it down, they turned it on, they turned it off, and they weren't even in the same state. And it was super creepy and super scary. Yeah.
And how long ago was that, Jeff? That wasn't recent. That was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So
what did they hack?
The engine control module.
Yeah.
The electronic control module.
Why would the engine control module have some ability to communicate with something in another state? Period. I mean, that means there was some cellular radio attached.
Exactly.
Yes.
Why?
Because Jeep had it in there, so they could be sending and receiving information to their cars. And it wasn't something that was there for the end user. It was for their own use. And
it's like a firmware update, just to put it in simple terms. They had the ability to do those type of updates to it. So it went awry. Don't get me wrong. I'm not supporting it.
Howdy.
Boy, howdy. Yeah. So.
But it's good to know that the entertainment system was secure.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I spent hours getting those presets done on the radio.
Webb, it's interesting though that you explain it that way, because that makes perfect sense. And I've, as much as I enjoy CarPlay, I can see that being it's just one more vector of attack. So in some ways, I would almost think that Apple would not want access to that, because that way then they could not be blamed if anything goes wrong. And we're still early days in all this stuff. And so if I were Apple's insurance company, I'd say, do you really want to be an additional defendant in that? Or do you want to be out on summary judgment because you can show that you absolutely had no way, there was no way to cross that bridge and get into the car system, the car's operational systems. So
now I'm waiting for someone to turn this into a really big problem. Not that I want them to, but I expect it will happen. Part of the problem with the Jeep thing was that you could use that flaw to track any Jeep, at least any Jeep that had that technology in it. So you could tell where anyone's car was at any time. So if you have a way to get into the infotainment system, then you potentially have a way to be able to start tracking where someone is with their car without authorization. So it wouldn't surprise me at some point to see someone take advantage of that in some way, or to use it to force content that you don't want to see to suddenly appear on your infotainment system. You remember when everyone used to go war driving to find Wi-Fi networks?
Mm-hmm.
How about driving down the highway and just putting just unspeakable images on the infotainment system in Fords as you drive by?
What's worse is as you drive by Coffee Shop X, that an ad pops up for them unrequested.
Yeah.
The thing I don't understand is related to the GM not having CarPlay and so on. it seems like the obvious solution is for GM to develop an app that works in the CarPlay environment. And that app and only that app has additional access to GM features. And then they have some control over what's displayed and maybe don't make it available to CarPlay except through their particular app. That would seem to solve problems kind of on all sides. They could charge money for upgrades to the app. That I could live with that.
I understand your point, Eric. I'll give you an example that happens with CarPlay right now. Okay. And this happens to me on two of my cars. Is that if I want to listen to my Sirius XM radio and I want to see what's the song that's playing, it will not transfer over to CarPlay. CarPlay is its own little world, its own environment. Okay. So I can listen to my satellite radio, don't get me wrong, but I can't get the on-screen information like what album is this and what song is it, so on and so forth. And I think the same thing carries over. I think GM or Apple or whoever, they don't want to have this gateway to the main car system. If you're in the CarPlay infotainment system only, okay. Now, the reason why I like CarPlay is, we've talked about this before, is that it does give you a common user interface. It doesn't matter which car I'm in, it works the same way. If I get into one car that has satellite radio and I want to go to the other car and try that same station and put it in, the save it as a save station, there's two different user interfaces to do that. Just frustrates the hell out of me. So that's why I like the CarPlay interface. But I wish that there was the Sirius XM. Yeah.
This is probably one of the big reasons why Apple announced CarPlay 2, because this works around all of that. Create the whole thing as the Apple module, and now you fix that problem.
Webb, I'm curious. Can you just let me do it this way? On my Honda,
yeah.
Okay, when I plug my phone in, all right, I get an entry on the Honda's infotainment system, or the Honda control panel.
Okay.
That is CarPlay. I tap CarPlay, and then the whole thing just goes to CarPlay, so I can't control any of the other things. To your point, including AM, FM radio, Sirius XM, any of
same
those.
Thing. Yeah.
It's the same thing with the
same problem.
Yeah. And okay, that seems like a small compromise to continue to have the ability to have CarPlay, because frankly, I don't think I've used any of the other options 3 times since I've owned the car.
Yeah.
So we're going to run short on time. There's one other article that I threw in late into our Slack earlier. This is, I want to make sure I put it in both. This is a podcast today and an article from Derek Story about what to do with your old family photos. And if you are the family historian or the family photo keeper, you really should pay attention to this. Probably 10, 11 years ago, I undertook the process of digitizing our family photos. And these are photos that are stuck in shoeboxes and, were scattered all over the world. And the whole point was, get them into one place and get them digitized so they don't degrade any further. And I mean, on my kitchen table, I had like 7 stacks, 2 feet high, of photos. And what Derek proposes here is a really interesting, simple way to archive those things in something that's in a fashion that's not quite as burdensome, so that you have them and then can do with them what you want, but at least you're preserving them. So this is well worth the time to listen to the podcast or read the article. I would encourage anybody that's out there that has some of those old photos, because really those are precious. You don't realize, we've said it a million times when we're talking about backups, but one of the first things you hear from people that have been through a terrible fire or a terrible hurricane or tornado is that they lost all their photos. And so this is a way to get them into the cloud where they're nice and safe, and they're somewhere else if anything happens to your local copies. So I don't know if any of you have gone down that path of digitizing old photos, but yeah, it can be time consuming at worst.
Mhm.
Dave, sorry, are you talking?
Yeah, I got on mute.
I thought you were.
I did digitize an old 8mm movie of while I was younger, and but I sent it off to a third party. So, but digitizing photos is very time consuming, but it also can be very enjoyable too. You get to go through and there's some nostalgia looking at old photos of your family. So yeah, it's well worth it. And Derek Story is a great photographer and he's a great podcaster. So that's a great source to follow with this topic.
Yeah, I wish I'd had that 10 years ago when I was doing the project, because it would have made it go a lot faster. And there are services out there where you can send your photos away or your home movies away and have them digitized. And that too is not a bad way. It's a decent investment. And they've gotten better, both better and less expensive. But I confess that when I used some of those, there was always that paranoia of I'm putting all this precious stuff in this box and I'm turning it over to a delivery service. And so I was insuring the heck out of it and tracking it in every way I could. And if they'd existed then, I would have put an AirTag in with them. So
Epson has a scanner it looks same form factor as the Fujitsu scanners that probably many of you have. It's like an auto scanner that you can, and unlike the Fujitsu scanner, the Epson scanner, you can put photos in. So you can like put a pile of photos in and it'll go like, whoop, 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 whoop. And it works really well. The biggest problem then is, the time it takes to put some kind of metadata on them. And I think it's, it's not super cheap, but actually, if you have a significant amount, it's a lot cheaper than sending it off to a service. And it doesn't have the problem of what you just said of, the uncertainty of sending things off, through some sort of, where they could get lost in the mail or at the facility. So I think it's an Epson 440, and I have one, and it's pretty great for that.
yeah, and I don't want to steal the article's thunder, Jim. So I'm going to suggest that it's a great option. No question.
I did look at that article. But what they're doing is still going to take a huge amount of time for any more than a few dozen, and not that it still doesn't take a lot of time with this Epson, and I've got that, and I still have a lot of photos that I haven't gotten around to scanning. But that's mostly because I find myself like, trying to figure out like what, if I get them in there, even still useless if I don't have some sort of metadata on what is it, what year is it, that kind of stuff. So I find that's what, takes a huge amount of time, more so than the actual scanning.
Now you hit it right on about the time. It just takes absolutely forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a ton of slides. I mean, I got to go up in my closet there. I have boxes upon boxes of slides, and wanted to start to go through with them. And I bought one of those little. It's a great little device, the Kodak branded, that scans the slides. But you got to do it one by one, and it just takes forever. But my wife had a family member had passed away, and then they got some of the old slides that they had and wanted to get them all digitized. And I was like, sure, let me just buy. It's $120 or $150 little scanner. But again, time is valuable. Sending a place like Legacy Box was the company that I used for the movie, and they were very good, and they're very popular. They advertise everywhere, so I had very good experience, and I didn't feel that uncomfortable shipping it. They kept it very secure, giving you with tracking and all that. So things can get lost, but at least it's trackable, and it's being tracked there, and it's being tracked when it comes back to you. So The good thing is they send you the digitized copy over shares. You can download it, so you have it before they even send you back the old media. But slides are fun to do. But I love slides. I mean, I think we all remember back in the days having those 80 slide trays with the
carousel,
ectographs, the carousel, and doing those shows. And I remember setting one up when I was in high school years and years ago. So. But now they're just banished into a box. But there's also a lot of great memories. A lot of people love taking slides back in those days, and you want to get them digitized. You don't want that film to fade away.
Except when somebody invites you over to their house for dinner and says, "Let me show you the slides of my last vacation."
Yeah, and there's 180 slides you got to go sit through, right?
Yeah. But Rich in the chat room says some local libraries have all sorts of digitizers, sheet feeders for photos, etc. Never heard of that. I did not know that, Rich.
Yeah, Rich works for a library locally here, so I know exactly what he's talking about. They have our local library has a very good has a very good thing here. So.
Libraries are great resources for a lot of things.
Yeah. I just heard now I can't remember which podcast, but I heard today someone talk about they were a librarian, but they referred themselves as an information professional. And I really like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Oh, Brian, what? Your local library has telescopes to borrow?
Yeah. You have a couple of them. You can reserve them like you reserve a book. You go on a wait list, and it might be like, they're so popular, like 6 months away, but eventually you'll get it for a week.
I wouldn't be surprised our local library does that too.
Yeah.
Wow. I've got to spend a little more time at my local library. I've been using the Libby app to borrow stuff from it, but I don't think they ever send me a telescope.
You'll be amazed what you see in libraries. You'd be amazed when you see libraries these days.
Interesting.
It's amazing how they've changed libraries.
Oh, totally.
And there was an article that I read this week that I can't even remember the title of it, but all had to do with libraries having to evolve again. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal this week. Anyway.
Okay, so Eric, jump in. Say what you put in our chat room.
Oh, there's a library near here that does drone rental. They have like a little suitcase drone, and you can check it out and fly it up above, like your house or whatever, or take a picture and then return it back to the library. And so far, it's all in one piece.
Wow,
they maybe have an electronics club that does repairs, but so far they've had good luck with it.
There's also rents out little passes for museums and state parks and things like that too.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
they rent. You mean they
loan them out? I mean, you go there. They have a limited supply. You can check them out with your library card, and then it's valid for a certain amount of time. And then it waives the fee of the cost that if you were going to go to a museum or the charge for going to a state park or something of that nature.
Wow, I'm gonna have to check out libraries. I had no idea. I mean, I know that they rent like DVDs and all that. Sometimes sometimes loan them out. Sometimes to generate a little revenue, they charge a pathetically small amount for Blu-ray or DVD. But this is really educational. So the moral of the story is go visit your local library.
Yep.
That's it for the I had one other story. We'll get to that another time because that'll generate some discussion and it's not really time sensitive. So we'll get to that later. So with that, I want to go around the table, let the panel introduce themselves again, and then we will get out of here. And I'm going to flip it around and put Mr. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs up first because he got here late and didn't have a chance to contribute a lot, but now he gets to tell us all about himself.
All right, great. All right, so here we go. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. You can find me both on Mastodon, now Blue Sky, and Twitter or X at Brian8944.
Great. Thank you very much. Good to have you, Brian. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Webb Bixby, the man with the quilt that is just stunning. Where can folks connect with you?
Well, last week I put down everything that I said. I'm just going to make it simple. At Webb Bixby at Twitter.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Jeff Gamet, always good to see you. Where can folks connect with you?
On the socials, Jay Gamet, on basically everything. I am most active on Mastodon and Instagram. Then for shows, here with you on Tuesdays. Thank you for letting me come back yet again. Then on Thursdays, Dave lets me join in on In Touch with iOS. So thank you for that. Then British Tech Network, Thursdays, The Big Show, Fridays, The Mac Show. And then Brian Chaffin and I record The Context Machine.
Great. Thank you so much. Tell Brian we said hello.
I will do that.
Please.
Okay, Brian.
Jim Ray, good to have you as always. We always appreciate your developer perspective. Where can folks connect with you?
You can find me at my company website, which is provue.com, PROVUE. There's some excellent software there for tracking goat milk concentrations. And also you can chat with me on Mastodon at provuejim@techhub.social.
I feel obligated to point out that Jim's software cannot be used just for tracking goat milk butterfat concentrations. There are one or two other uses for it.
No, that's it. New policy.
You cornered the market.
I'm not going to try to touch that.
If you use it for anything else, I will track you. I will hunt you down. And
it's part of the new system he's developing for his own smartphone, Lacked OS.
Oh, man.
And mic drop.
Yes.
Boom.
Eric Bolden, this whole thing is your fault. Where can folks connect with you?
I can be found at EA Bolden at techhub.social and on Mastodon, as well as EA Bolden at mas.to on Mastodon.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. Thank you for sharing some of the farm show behind the scenes. It really is interesting. Really is interesting.
There's a lot that goes on.
Yeah. Last but absolutely not least, he'll be out back milking his goat later, Mr. David Ginsburg. David, good to see you. Where can folks connect with you?
Good to see you, Chuck. You can find me at In Touch with iOS at intouchwithios.com. YouTube channel is youtube.com/intouchwithios. I'm here on Tuesdays. I'm on the Mac Show on Fridays. And you can find me on Mastodon at DaveG65. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, David. Good to have you.
Thanks.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We do this Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I definitely want to thank the chat room. They threw a lot of comments in tonight. They educated me on some things my local library may have. I'm going to be checking that out. You should too. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.